Yo, so this is a little excerpt from a much larger video which I released recently, titled Lazarus is not the new Bebop. Wanted to let you know up front, just in case you already watched that video in its entirety, if for no other reason. In this section, I discussed the debate around the question of why no one panicked in Lazarus, even though the world was ending throughout the story. I discussed why I do in fact think this was intentional and what I think it means. Now, I did get a couple of comments on that original YouTube video, and I basically agree with their sentiment in saying that this idea wasn't actually that well developed in the actual story of Lazarus. So if you do feel like putting on your fedora and saying, bad conveyance, actually, I totally get it. That's totally fine. Nonetheless, I still think it's a pretty interesting theme, and I do think it was intentional, even if I'm, perhaps doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the actual explanation of this. And so I do think this is at least worth having here as a standalone video. But anyway, I've yapped for long enough. This is me explaining why no one panicked in Lazarus, even though the world was ending. I've now seen much of the back and forth discussion online over the weeks, and even watched the entire show. More on that later. But on this point about the characters and just the general populace lacking any real sense of urgency or true distress when the world is basically guaranteed to be ending for humanity, there's been this ongoing counterpoint in online discussion that this is in fact the point. This is, in the simplest, most straightforward terms, a commentary on people's general reactions to real-world warnings of substantial but often abstract, life-threatening future events, such as global warming. Yes, I am in fact totes for real. As we see in Dr. Skinner's flashback scenes, he predicted the melting of the final polar ice caps and the rising of the sea levels, even down to the date on which they would occur. But no one among the global politicians and elites was willing to hear his warnings out, let alone derail their current plans to attempt to solve this new, hypothetical future problem. It's heavily implied that this event set him off.
How dare you!
And played a large part in driving him to become more cynical about humanity. This, obviously among other events and circumstances which are revealed later in the story, and I don't want to downplay those events, but this, among those other events, led him to disappear along with the cure and start his whole search for Dr. Skinner to save the world plot. This all being a core theme is also backed up by the admittedly breathtakingly beautiful and poignant Episode 7. Team Lazarus takes a trip to an underwater city, now swallowed by rising sea levels. They're chasing a lead on Dr. Skinner, but they come away feeling that they were putty in his hands once again, simply stringed along on the trail that he wanted them to follow, seeing the sights that he wanted them to see.
They played us like a damn fiddle!
They describe seeing what they found as basically having to walk in Dr. Skinner's shoes for a while, to see what he saw while no one else was listening, while no one else took the time to care for the environment or even the individuals already being affected by these changes. Due to the trail Dr. Skinner left for the team to follow, they wound up witnessing the direct effects of the global-scale incidents he predicted would occur. And yet, once again, no one listened, even though for him, it already was the end of the world as we knew it. And if it's not obvious enough, the idea here is that just as the global politicians and elites ignored his warnings of climate disaster, even though, in universe at least, Dr. Skinner was absolutely correct, so too do the civilians of the world continue just living on like usual, even when they're told at face value that they're all going to die. In my opinion, this is all a sort of commentary on the reaction of people in the modern world to warnings of possible nightmare scenarios and life-changing events, generally speaking. People in the modern world no longer trust the words of politicians and those who they perceive as experts or as the elites. And of course, that's often for good reason. Corruption often runs deep in those with power and influence. People are cynical to threats of all such kinds because they've been made so many times, over and over, and never yet amounted to anything that affected them. Certainly nothing that affected them to the same degree as their daily circumstances and their need for daily necessities. People are so consumed by their daily lives that they don't really care to begin with, and often the threats seem so abstract or poorly defined to them that they don't really even register as real. And anyway, if it is really a problem, someone else will take care of it in the future. And while I'm certainly reading real-world trends and sentiments into some of this, I do think that this is an accurate interpretation now having seen the entire show. I think that no one freaking out was in fact the point all along, and this particular complaint did turn out to be exceptionally silly and even totally missing the point. Need more long-term proof? There's a set of scenes in the first 2 episodes, just as the search begins and just as panic should have theoretically set in. A set of scenes that showcases an artist on a late-night talk show announcing the release date of an album that no one will be alive to hear when it comes out. And they just laugh it up and continue the promotion as if it's business as usual. Then we see clips of business and stock market movements and political press briefings and footage of masked, anarchistic rioters all over the news, all of which we are now so accustomed to seeing in the modern era. Then,
several months later,
when the story is over, and big surprise, spoiler warning, but not really, obviously, one way or another, they eventually save the world. Who could have guessed that it would end the way that everyone knew it would? More on that later. But when the story is over, Dr. Skinner has been found, the newly formulated vaccine is released, and the world is saved. We once again see press briefings, and news headlines, and stock rallies, and an artist on a late-night talk show. Whether the world is ending or the world is saved, the world keeps spinning. People just keep living their daily lives regardless of the warnings one way or another. And ultimately, life at the beginning of the story and life at the end of the story looks much the same. Which I'll admit is one of the better executed themes in the show. Whether I totally agree with its real-world accuracy or not would require further scrutiny, but of everything in the show, this idea, this theme is interesting and well executed. I do think it was very much intentional, not an accident. It's a feature, not a bug. That's not to say that I'm not reading a lot into it, especially that whole paragraph about the modern general population's motivations and sentiments and distrusts of experts and all that, but I think that you're definitely supposed to read real-world stuff into this, especially given that it's such a modern world meta-commentary sort of show, which features references to corporate and government corruption, and constantly references real-world American business, politics, and culture. Now, do I actually agree with the profundity of this theme thing? I don't know. I mean, I don't trust experts or elites either, and I too have become somewhat callous and cynical to the never-ending attempts to capture our attention with predictions of Armageddon-like events and impending financial crisis and the like. So I can certainly see the other side of the argument just as well, but perhaps that's part of the point, and that's not necessarily important to my interpretation or my appreciation of these subtle yet clear themes, which were probably better executed on than anything else in the show. But anyway.
当たり前じゃんよ。バーン